everybody. Welcome back to Pretend World's Real People. As always, I'm Tyler. And I had an exhausting weekend. I hope everybody else had a very relaxing one. But I was relaxing on vacation for the first 4 days of last week. And then the last 3 days of this previous week, I was just flooded with self tapes, which is an amazing thing. The second you go on vacation, that's when things always happen. But I'm a little tired from that. So I have a nice warm cup of coffee in front of me, and I'm ready to deliver this intro to you amazing listeners, because this week we have a real treat. I have a friend of the show's friend, who's now a friend of the show. Anyway, God, that was so stupid. Emma King Farlow was a previous guest I had on the show. She's a dear friend of mine. She told me this person would be amazing to have on the show, and he was. He is an American-born artist who's now working full-time in the UK. He left a career in IT to craft a career for himself as a screenwriter. So he began just networking with industry professionals, with people who love film, and quickly developed a career in the lecture circuit as well. He gives lectures to screenwriting classes all around the UK, around Europe, around the US. He's just amazing. And his latest project is being adapted into a graphic novel. It's insane. I can't say anything else about the man. He is incredibly endearing. He motivates me to write even more, and I can only imagine where he's going to go from here. So let's get right into it. I'm going to shut up. Tired Tyler's going to shut up, and I'm going to lead you right into this episode. Let's sit down. Let's have a chat with the amazing Bob Schultz.
Sure. Hi, I'm Bob Schultz. I'm a screenwriter slash independent producer, and like many people trying to make it in the writing game, I am an instructor, a teacher, a mentor, a lecturer, a reader. I give notes. Pretty much try to do anything I can to keep my feet wet in the world of movies and screenplays.
Which is one of the hardest things you can do, right? Like being a writer in
Yeah.
general is terrible, but being a screenwriter, that's a whole nother gamble.
Well, the beauty of being a screenwriter, the beauty of being a writer or working with writers is that we are simultaneously the most narcissistic people and the most self-loathing people at the same time. If I finish writing something, I will say, I'm sorry, you might have to cut this, but I don't know how we feel about swearing.
Oh, you can swear as much as you want.
Oh, great. Okay. So I could finish writing something and I could finish writing something and look at it and be like, this is the worst piece of shit ever committed to paper. But then as soon as I give it to somebody else for notes and they say, might want to change this one little thing, I'm like, screw you, you don't know what I'm going for. How dare you? My perfect little baby is outstanding. So it's sort of reassuring to work with other writers and sort of learn that that particular brand of psychosis is not unique to me, that I'm part of the larger community of people who will simultaneously beat ourselves up and defend what we've written with our lives if we have to.
Oh my God. Yeah. Honestly, for myself, it took forever for me to give something I wrote to somebody and not feel so destroyed by their feedback and
Yeah.
use it as more of what it is, feedback. How long did that take you to kind of shed the I don't want to call it narcissism, but just that personal integrity we have to our writing and just let somebody rip it apart to make it better?
I My route to screenwriting was, I mean, I don't know if it was unusual, but the route to screenwriting sort of beat that out of me. I always wanted to be a writer. I've always loved reading and I've always wanted to put words on the page, and I wrote short stories and so on. And then I kind of moved into tech writing. Um, so I would when I graduated college, I knew I wanted to travel around, but I didn't have any money. So and the internet was just sort of getting geared up in terms of being able to be a place to find work. So I would take like a short kind of writing gig someplace, writing a instruction manual for a cell phone or writing, whatever I can. And then like a 6-week gig, and I would rent a room in somebody's house, so it would automatically have like locals that I could hang with. And then after that, and when that contract was running out, I would take another one someplace else. And so I traveled all around America, doing these short little writing gigs. But then eventually, due to some family illness and so on, I needed to be in a place for a while. So I got a job as like the editor of a very small town newspaper. And and not, the big news of the week would be, what color they were going to paint the fire hydrants. It's not like I was breaking big news or anything, but I would write a column every week, like an editor's column every week. And very often my opinions did not sort of sync with the people of the community. And so people would write letters or come to the office and call me names and call me out. And sometimes legit, I was 24 and thought I knew everything in the world, but also, sometimes not quite so legitimate. I had a legitimate point, they wouldn't take it. But getting that sort of like direct, let's say feedback, but that direct criticism of what I wrote really hurt at first. And then, but eventually you sort of learn to sort of recognize that everyone's sort of coming from their own experience and have their own sort of journey they're going on. And so now, though the people that were criticizing that were not looking to make my writing better. They were just they just had different political standing than I did and so on. But getting feedback on my screenplays took, it wasn't that much of a transition, because people giving feedback are always trying to, or very often trying to make your writing better. It's not always the case, of course. I mean, anyone who's been in any sort of like movie made by committee kind of circumstance recognizes that everybody around the table has a voice, and everyone around the table sort of wants to put their 2 cents in, and it's not necessarily motivated by, I want to make the movie better. It could be, I just want to impress the boss, or we can get more money for the budget if we add this other thing or whatever. So filmmaking is such a collaborative process, and screenwriting is such a solitary process, that making that transition from page to screen can be pretty bumpy for a lot of writers. I myself wrote something that got made, and I got fired off the job because I decided, I was going to die on every hill, and then eventually I died on one. And it's a lesson that's learned the hard way, but I'm better for it now. So I think that writing each script is a process, and I think that as writers we need to sort of really appreciate process more than we appreciate the end product. But each screenplay is a process, but also the development of the human being into becoming a writer is also a process that I think we're always undergoing. And as long as being a writer is part of a bigger mosaic that is a human life, the more that we have to learn, because we are always changing. I turn 52 in a couple of weeks, and I'm about to have my third wedding anniversary. I mean, of my first marriage. So it's like, to adjust my life to being a husband in just the last few years is a real big transition for someone who is the living embodiment of, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But, but you see the world differently when you're part of a partnership or part of a family or whatever else. And so, and our writing, I think, always is just a piece of that puzzle, but it reflects. It's not so much a puzzle or a pie. It's more like a fractal or a crystal, where like every facet of it sort of reflects on the other ones. And so who I am now is going to affect how I write now and what I write now, as opposed to what it might have been pre-pandemic or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And that's why I think that it's such a little wonderful thing that we do, insofar as something that could have been a perfect piece of writing to represent me 10 years ago I might read it today and be like, I don't know who this person is. And it's like, and it was me all along. It's crazy. It's really something that I just cannot get enough of learning about, and I feel like can die at 100 years old and still not have learned everything I can about the creative process and the learning process and the writing process and everything. It's endlessly fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, one, I want to say happy early birthday and congratulations on, your third anniversary coming up.
Yeah,
But
thanks. It's a big time, big summer.
yeah, yeah, you know what? It reminds me of I'm a huge fan of podcasts and interviews, obviously, but I was listening to an interview with Mike Flanagan of The Haunting of Hill House and Doctor Sleep,
Mhm.
and it's something I noticed when he was talking about his relationship and how it affected his writing later in life, and it was, his writing became less cynical. So if you watch his earlier stuff, it's very bleak, very dire, and then he meets, Kate Siegel, his wife, and his stories are filled with hope at the end, or there's a wrap up that's in a somewhat positive light. So I'm curious what has changed, if anything has changed in your writing since meeting your wife?
It's funny. My wife my wife tells the story of when she knew I was the one. Was she we were dating, and kind of casually, like not seeing each other all that often. And then there was a John Carpenter film festival here in London, and she's like, I want to go see Prince of Darkness, and I want to go see Prince of Darkness. Would you like to go? And I said sure. I mean, I my favorite John Carpenter is They Live. Um, but I had never seen Prince of Darkness, and so I was like, sure, I'd love to. So we went and we're hanging out and everything. And I mean, I knew I got pretty close to the notion that she was pretty special when she invited me to see Prince of Darkness on the big screen. But then the movie ended, and we're sitting there, and I said to her, "That movie was awful. I loved it." Right? And she was like, "Oh boy, I think I got one here." Where we can sort of see eye to eye. So like and then of course during the whole pandemic, and she was sick for a while and everything, and so like there was a like movies have been part of our relationship, an integral part of our relationship from the very beginning. And our love of our love, as they say over here in England, their love of film and cinema as opposed to movies in the theater. But like all of that stuff was a big deal. And then we you know for somebody with a little bit of an ego surrounding his taste in movies, I always thought of it as like a guilty pleasure or something to be embarrassed about, that I have a real weakness for uh like Hallmark Christmas movies.
Yeah.
I mean, they all are exactly the same, but I like, they were one trick pony, but I like the trick, so I like the pony. And but she's like, I like them too. And so like we all Christmas time long, we just have the Christmas channel on, and it's like, okay, who's the woman who's gonna wind up having to quit her job in order to find the man she loves, who's like a rugged lumberjack or whatever? It's like, there she is. Okay, we get, it's it's just so much fun. So what I write, I think, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling on a bit, but to answer your question, the I always try to think in terms of, when I'm writing, I write for a particular reader or a particular audience. Generally speaking, the audience that I write for is 15-year-old Bob.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm like, if 15-year-old me would have thought something was cool, I'll write it. So that's sort of what my audience is. So like, it's not exactly, so it's like, it's Carpenter stuff or Cronenberg stuff, or or broad comedy like Airplane, that kind of thing. That 15-year-old Bob who would go to the video store and then come back with a stack of 10 VHS tapes to watch over the weekend, that kind of thing. Um, but now that I've met my wife, I also try to kind of write for her as well.
Mm.
So I write like a little bit more low budget horror than I would have before. And I'm working on a Christmas project right now. So it's I mean, I'm working on three different things right now, but one of them is a Christmas project. And it's tremendous fun to sort of think, what would Deborah like, and do it. And in fact, she's not a writer, but she is an excellent sounding board for me as a writer. I
Wow.
don't mind giving away what I'm working on right now. I'm not particularly precious about it. Um, So I had an idea. I was texting something and I needed to use the word Sasquatch in the text. And because I have big fat thumbs, there's a typo and I dropped a D in there, so it said Sasquatch instead of Sasquatch. And I was like, Sasquatch, a team of Sasquatches. Okay. Now I have an idea about a team of crime fighting Sasquatches, right? That like they work underground and they try to keep secret, but they fight for justice. And so I'm like, okay, so I don't know exactly what it is, and I'm typing it out, and I'm coming up with ideas and outlining and throwing out, and going through index card after index card, throwing them away. It's just not right, just not right. And she's like, "How's it going?" And I said, Deborah, it's I just can't quite get a beat on what Sasquatch is. And she's like, "Team of underground crime fighters. It's the A team, isn't it?" And I was like, "Of course, it's the A team." So now I know who all the characters are. It's like the A team with Sasquatches, and it's like somehow like when I think I know a lot of writers, myself included, go through these phases where it's like I can't see the story for this. I can't see the story for the story. It's like I'm so bogged down in the details. I can't see the through line, the arc, exactly what this thing is clearly. And she just cuts through all the crap and it's like, this is what it is, right? And I'm like, that is exactly what it is, thank you. And I don't know that she's ever tried her, I don't think she's ever tried her hand at screenwriting, but that clarity of story, the notion that stories are like, you look in my room now, it's just ambient light, there's just light everywhere, but that's not story. Story is focused like a laser beam. It puts power into light, it puts strength into light, and it's very crisp, it has clear lines. Screenwriting does. I mean, novel writing can be sort of all over the place, but screenwriting is very directed, and that she can identify that laser beam in a way that I sometimes miss. It blows my mind every time. Like, why couldn't I see it? And then I can write it. Then I'm one of those people who's like, sitting there writing, just typing along, talking about other things, taking phone calls, doing whatever. It's like because like the story's just sort of telling itself, and that's amazing. But I don't think I'd be where I am in terms of the stories that I'm writing or the clarity in those stories or what those stories ought to be in order to be most effective if I didn't have my wife to bounce the ideas off of. So in a very, very specific, direct way, getting married has helped my writing. It's helped me to actually put words on the page, in a way that I'm happy with.
Wow, I mean, yeah, from the sounds of it, it sounds like you found your literal life partner, right? Like this person
Yeah.
will just, like I said, she cuts through the crap and goes, "Oh yeah, that's amazing."
Yeah.
I it's an immense gift too. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you guys, if you haven't already, just tried writing something over a holiday just to see what happens.
It would be a treat. It's
Yeah.
very it's I find my writing to be very momentum based.
Mm.
I can write if I write for 8 hours in a day, I'll write a lot more than if I write an hour a day over 15 days. You know what I mean? It's like if you sit down, the ball starts. You can push the snowball, and it's got to roll down the hill. So it would be a matter of sort of finding time where we both have a lot of time together, and then but I feel like I would also fall into my habit of just going, wait, I got something here, I'm going, rather than actually talking it out. I've never really written with a writing partner side by side. Like I do a lot of rewriting work, so
Mm.
I'm behind on one right now, in fact, and it's but someone writes a first draft and sends it to me, and I rewrite and send it back, that kind of thing, or vice versa. But never a kind of thing where we're sort of sitting in the same room. Although I'm fascinated by that process. I'm friends with Dave Reynolds. He wrote Finding Nemo. He wrote The Emperor's New Groove.
Mm.
But he started off on Conan O'Brien's late night show, and he always talks about in the room pitching jokes and so on. And I'm like, it's not a skill set that I think I have to be that quick and to sort of be that collaborative with people. But I'm so fascinated by it. I feel like I would love to be like invisible and watch that process happen, um, and be awestruck by it. So I would of course love to write something with my wife. I don't know if she'd be so interested, and I only hope that I can sort of. I don't know. I would love if I could, help her in terms of whatever her creative endeavor is. She sort of tries different things. Whatever she's doing at the time, I try to help her to in the same way, as she helps me. But it's great to be sort of in a situation where you have a partner who believes in you despite any evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
You know?
I know exactly how you feel. Yeah,
Yeah,
you'd mentioned something previously about, I get more done, as far as momentum goes if I work like 8 hours a day instead of 1 hour over the course of like 15 days, and I feel the exact same way. I have to give myself a deadline, and I have to go into that full time, and, I'll I'll be writing in my office, and my girlfriend will lean in and says, What's your movie about again?" And I'll just ramble out, "Oh, it's about remote viewing," and then I'll just kinda go back into it like it's a completely normal thing to
yeah,
just kinda shout out and
yeah.
go back to it. So, yeah, I think a lot of writers are, sitting there saying, "Oh, I'm not alone," because a lot of us do have to sit there for a little while, let things kind of ruminate and ferment instead of just saying 60 minutes a day. Yeah, because I feel like there's a disconnect in your pages there for most writers if you just write for 1 hour a day.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody or criticizing anyone if that's your process and if you can do it. I mean, I know people they have kids and they have doctor's appointments and they have
Yeah.
their day job and all this other stuff. So maybe an hour a day is all you can get, and you sort of develop the ability to do that. And I mean, good for you. I wish I could. I wish I could. I wish I could be like on the bus and like have my little laptop out and just say, okay, I'm going to bang out 3 pages while I'm traveling to this other place. It's just not how it works for me. But what I can do and what I do is always sort of like being aware of my environment and the conversations going on around me and so on, so that if there's a funny turn of phrase somebody says, or an interesting situation, or somebody who might develop into a character or something, I jot it down, or I send myself a note on my phone or something. So I have this gigantic word file on my desktop of just like ideas and lines of dialogue and scenes that I had to cut because they didn't work in the thing and so on. Things that I am, if evidence is to be believed, only the if the evidence is to be believed, they only these things only putting them in the file is enough because I never go back to the file. you know, it's like I'm glad to know they're there, but it's like now it's 200 pages long and I'm never going to read it. So so I'm just happy to have it sitting there, never to be seen again. But if I were to cut it and kill it and delete it forever, I wouldn't be happy with that. So I just sort of accept myself as someone who will have this file on his desk, and then when I die, when someone's going through my computer, be like, "What's this?" and be like, "Oh my God, Bob was fully insane with voices in his head and creating a manifesto." Um, but that's what it is to be a writer, though, isn't it? It's like you try to stitch together things that don't seem related in order to say something important about the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're constantly trying to put together a puzzle where the pieces don't necessarily match, and yeah, the overall image has that thematic element to it. It's a crazy, yeah, like I imagine what what people would compare to a character in a show or a film, having like the red, yeah, twine kind of like going to different points all around a room. And they go, "No, it makes complete sense." And the other characters are standing there going, "You are absolutely out of your mind, man. There's no way
Yeah,
it makes sense."
yeah.
Uh,
Thank you for pointing that out. I have one of those paranoid boards in my
yeah,
head.
exactly. Like, no, it all connects. It's Kennedy and it's Culver's. Like, okay, all right, this is not gonna work. Uh, but I am curious, man. Like, how did you get started in screenwriting? Was it something you wanted to do, from the jump when you were renting, movies as a kid and just sitting down and absorbing all that information? How did that come to be?
Well, I mean, I always wanted to write, and it was short stories, and it was in the newspaper. But I kind of steered clear of wanting to be a screenwriter because from a very young, when I was, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something, my father got very, very sick, and he was sick for a long time before he finally died. And the, you know, the pressure was never put on me to be the man of the house, even though I was the oldest son, quote unquote man of the house. But regardless of that, I mean, I'm underselling it. It's not that that pressure was never put on me. My mother specifically said, "You are not the man of the house now. You're 12 years old. We are a family. We're going to get through this together, right?" But nevertheless, the instinct kicked in that I was the man of the house now, and so I was helping take care of my brothers, and I was going to school. And everything. Where I found my escape was in those movies, and so I kind of wanted that to be safe space, and I didn't want to sort of try to write it and get into it. But eventually, I reached a point where I did want to write screenplays, and I started. This was around the year 2000, and I was sort of dabbling with it. I'd come home from work. I was working in IT at the time, just writing down ideas. I wrote a screenplay that I thought was the greatest thing ever, and it turns out it's awful, like everyone's first project. But I wrote one and everything, and I kind of liked it. And then we had just sort of crossed over into 2001, and I decided I wanted to take a shot at it. And so circumstances sort of helped me because since I was working in IT and there was a lot of work and therefore money in the Y2K bug, I was doing okay and I had a little bit of money set aside. And now it's 2001, and the company I was working for was laying people off, and the whole industry was, because like we didn't need anyone working on the Y2K bug anymore. And and so the writing was on the wall for the industry as a whole, and I knew I wanted to be a writer, so I sort of just made the decision. I'm not happy what I'm doing, and other people I work with are happy with what we're doing, and I want to write. So if I just resign, someone else won't get laid off. And so I mean, I'm not saying I was being heroic. I was happy to leave, but it was also like the timing was right. Very often we all know what the jump is, but we were afraid to take the jump. But the timing was right, and so I decided I'm going to be a screenwriter. And so I moved to another town, the town where I'd gone to college. Shout out to Ithaca, New York. And I thought of screenwriting as my day job. And then I took a couple jobs at night. One, I was helping run a small independent movie theater, and the other one I was like the bouncer at a bar. I was checking IDs at a bar.
Oh wow.
And so those jobs paid the bills. I got a very low cost apartment and so on. Didn't have a car, so those jobs paid the bills, and I would get up 9, 10 o'clock each morning, because both of those are late night jobs. So I get up 9 10 o'clock each morning, have breakfast, sit down on my computer and write for the day. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and some of it was good and some of it wasn't so good, and some of it was good enough that if I rewrote it a few times, it would get better. Like I got better at the job, and then eventually I subscribed to, or picked up every now and then, a creative screenwriting magazine back when magazines were on paper, and and I read about the industry and what's going on and so on, and then creative screenwriting put on a conference in LA. So I went to LA and I met a bunch of other writers, and I met some people who were putting on another conference in Canada and so on. And I started working with them, and I started working with these screenwriting conferences, and as a result of that, they had pitching aspects to them where they pitch production companies and so on. And as a result of that, I would start meeting people and start, getting to know folks, and and making sort of friends in the industry. And look, I know that I'm a halfway decent writer, but the 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 film industry runs on who you know so much. I'm sure it's true with acting too, right? I mean, I imagine that you go out and audition a certain amount, but then also you probably get some opportunities where it's just someone's like, hey man, someone dropped out. Can you step
Yeah.
in? That kind of thing. And you only like get those opportunities if you're out there sort of churning the water and getting known and getting seen. And I was applying. I'm applying for lecturing jobs here. I lecture at a university in Bristol, but I'm applying for a job at NYU's London School, and there's one position that I'm underqualified for, and I think I'll apply anyway, because it's like once you sit down in someone's office and talk with them, maybe they'll think of you for something else.
Yeah.
So it's like it's always sort of like being out there, which is what I do with those conferences, and then one thing led to another, and I started producing with somebody, and we produced a couple things together, and I came over here, and I befriended the people at the London Screenwriters Festival, so I have friends over here too. And now a lot of the work I get here comes through people that I met at the London Screenwriters Festival. It's a guest speaker is doing a thing, and so he calls me and says, "Can you help?" Or somebody says, "I know that you are a writer. We need a writer to sort of just consult on this idea. Can you sit in for a little bit of something?" So it's how I got started was taking that first step off the cliff
Mm.
and trusting there's water in the gorge below. You know, but then it's just always about, it's about finding that time to actually put words on the page, of course. But it's also about meeting people and doing things and shaking hands. I mean, during COVID, of course, shaking hands, metaphorically speaking, but it's like, you know, shaking hands and seeing people and being available. And I mean, I get a lot of people approach me for work because they've seen me on stage giving a course, like privately, not even as part of a university or anything, giving a course on like act structure or character development, or you know what, how to inject your thing, your script with theme or whatever
Mm.
else. And I did that for the first time because I was asked, and I try to make it a habit to say yes as much as I can. And now I make a decent amount of my living going to places like, you know, all over England, going to Sweden, going to Australia, whatever, and giving these courses, going to Rome and giving these courses, despite the fact that I have terrible, terrible stage fright. I just know that I need to sort of face that fear in order to continue servicing the writing that I want to do.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you come up with rituals. I'm sure this is true of actors too. You come up with rituals to sort of get yourself in that right headspace, and then get out there and do your thing. And but as long as I, you know, and sometimes it happens that that sort of takes over, that day job kind of takes over your life, and I become a lecturer who doesn't write, a lecturer about writing instead of a writer who lectures.
Mm.
But it's but you try to just drag yourself back to, don't forget, this is all supposed to be about the writing,
Mm.
and then you just reset, readjust, fix it, you know, fix it if it's broken every step of the way. It's like that old thing about a person trying to like build a bridge across the river, and they have to like build the bridge as they're walking.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the stage fright part of it, there is something in acting or like live performance where we will go do something and then somebody afterwards will ask you, well, how did it go? And you'll say, I don't know. I
I
kind of
don't know.
blacked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know how it came out. So like what is your decompression method after, you know, those lecturing circuits or after a giant seminar you do? Do you have something that'll kind of help you just sort of shed it away and not think about it so you can go back into that writing mode?
Well, I mean, no. If I'm lecturing, that day's done.
Okay. You're done for
You
the
know, I mean, I do not
day.
go right immediately. I just I don't have it. But like, it's it's such hard work for me to get into character. And like you said, it's funny you said that because I completely relate about fully blacking out. You know, like I have no memory of anything that was said. You know, like there was one I was it was a few years back, and I don't remember what the context was, but I had cause to mention Burt Reynolds in the course of the thing. So I'm like, boppity bop bop, Burt Reynolds, you know. So you know, you're Burt Reynolds. You're driving. You're, you know, you need to be a rebel. You need to, you know, a rebel who's a hero. You need to, you know, drive your black Trans Am and get all the beer to Texarkana from Atlanta, whatever. And someone approached me later on that like as I left, I left the stage and I was walking down the corridor, probably to go to the bathroom, and somebody said, you know, said, "Hey Bob, I don't know if you heard, but Burt Reynolds died today." And I was like, "Oh, that's a shame, not the bandit," you know. And they're like, "Yeah, but you mentioned him on stage." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess I did, didn't I?" Like I don't know who that is, but on stage, but it's not me. And and so the decompression just comes from gradually coming back into reality. And if I'm part of a larger event, or if I have to do something directly after the lecture, that's that's then that decompression kind of happens gradually. But like when I'm lecturing in Bristol, for example, I live
Mm.
in London, and it's like a 2 hour train ride between London and Bristol. Now, I don't go every day, but like, you know, I will finish my lecture and then I will like walk to the pub that's right near the train station, and I'll have a pint just to sort of unwind. And then I'm like, I wonder how that went today. You know? And then when I get on the train, I always have like ambitions if I'm going to write, or I'm going to grade some screenplays or something.
Mm.
But instead, I swear to God, all I do is I my brain is so fried. I watch like Is It Cake or something. I watch like the least challenging thing I can find. like on my phone on the train.
That's fair. You need something that it's just like, I don't know, mentally almost numbing, where you
Yeah,
don't have to think about it.
yeah. I mean, I get exhausted. I'm an introvert insofar as I get exhausted by speaking and I get to
Mm,
people, and I get exhausted by presenting and I get exhausted by being asked a lot of questions. And, in moderate doses, of course, it's fine. But when I'm lecturing for 6 or 8 hours, or I'm doing 3 courses in a day or something, I am cooked, and my brain can only handle something that just will not challenge it whatsoever, which is troubling because I like to watch a lot of shows. I mean, right before I started talking to you, I watched last night's episode of Better Call Saul, and that is a show that rewards paying close attention to.
mhm. Yeah.
And there are lots of shows that are. I'm not saying this in a dismissive way. There are lots of shows that are fun, but you can sort of also noodle around on your phone or something while you're watching it. But they're still fun and full of energy. And believe me, after what the last few years have been like, those shows have tremendous value to like for people's mental health. It is certainly not a criticism at all. But I couldn't watch a Better Call Saul. I can't watch The Offer, the thing about the making of The Godfather or whatever,
Oh god.
when
Yeah.
I'm in that cooked state of mind because I really want to just drink it all in and absorb it. um, a lot of what I write is of that first kind. The stuff that I write, as I think, is a lot closer to "Is It Cake" than it is to The Godfather. Um, but so I have a lot of love and respect for those things. The best stuff, I think, is the stuff that works on both levels. I mean, you can watch Jaws as a masterclass in screenwriting and filmmaking, or you can watch it as just a great summertime popcorn blockbuster thriller, um, and enjoy it on both levels. And that's why it's endured for as long as it has. It's
Yeah.
it. So I would love to be able to write something that works on both levels, but by and large, I think a lot of that has to do with the filmmakers too. You write something, and then eventually you just have to let it go and let the filmmakers sort of take your baby and take the seed and nurture it into a flower. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's you never quite know what it's going to look like. Um, but that's why I feel like it's very important to learn to love writing more than to love having written.
Mm. Oh yeah. Yeah,
You know?
that's incredibly important. And you know what? It does that does help kind of pivot into another question I had for you, which was, you're saying, you're much like most writers are, we're all naturally introverted, and, just interacting with people all day, every day gets crazy exhausting, and we just want to kind of like take a nap at 5 o'clock in the afternoon
Mm.
afterwards. But when it comes to, say, directing one of your projects, what was that like? I mean,
Oh,
how much caffeine did you go through?
that was, I'm ashamed to say, a total disaster. Um,
Oh no.
I'm not a I'm just not a director by nature, and you learn
Mm,
that by trying. You know, it's I think directing is the opposite of screenwriting in a lot of ways, and God love the writers who can do both.
mm,
With all the respect in the world to Aaron Sorkin and to Jordan Peele and to all these writers who can also direct. I think that people who've written things that they've directed very often are directors who are just writing something that they want to direct. And I have tremendous admiration for that. I have tremendous admiration for every director, even ones who maybe aren't as successful at what they do as they would
mm,
like, or direct projects that maybe I'm not 100% behind. Um, but the way that I kind of I envision screenwriting, and the way that the mission that I think that I have as a screenwriter is to give the reader an amazingly entertaining experience on the page.
mm.
I think that Tarantino's another one who, if you read his screenplays, they're entertaining on the page, but also clearly he's writing. It's mostly notes to himself about what should happen when he directs it. You know, which is very entertaining as well. And you can tell that it's different for him because the screenplay for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is different from the novelization he put out of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because telling the story is different from writing the screenplay in order to direct it. So I think my job is to give an entertaining experience on the page, but also I think a writer's job is to stimulate and excite the imagination of the reader
Mm.
so that the story takes place in the reader's mind, right? It's if I write my thing properly, then you're going to have a great time reading it, even if what you're imagining is different from what I'm imagining. Okay, it is not my job is not to take what I'm imagining and lock it in on the page. Other writers probably think of it differently, but that's how I see it. And then a director's job is to take that thing that has been percolating in their imagination and solidify it into one specific thing. The film becomes the thing, right? So we've all had this experience where you read a book and loved the book, and then the movie comes out. It's like, yeah, it just wasn't. The book was better, or it wasn't quite what I thought of it as. And that's because what's on the film is the what was in the imagination of the director, not was in the imagination of you as the reader of the book.
Mm.
And so they're naturally going to be different, and I think that's the magic of it. So I found that I just didn't have the skills, didn't have the energy, didn't have the willpower, didn't have the leadership ability, all these things to take what was in my imagination and confine and, for lack of a better word, imprison it on film.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think that there are plenty out there. Like you look at like the improvisational comedies of Christopher Guest, Best in Show, and Waiting for Guffman, and these where there is a lot of ability for everyone's imagination to become part of it. And so maybe if I took another shot at it and it was more of a collaborative kind of thing, it would work. But I just did not have the skills for what I need to do, and I think probably there were a lot of people disappointed with that experience as well. Um, and I regret that, but you know, lessons have been learned,
Yeah.
and I think that at I'm better at writing. I think I'm better at inspiring people to go out there and do their thing
Mm.
than I am at going out there and doing that particular thing. Um, uh, so I mean, I'll tell you what though, I am working on a project. It's slowed down a little bit lately, but I'm working on a project that I wrote as a screenplay. Um, and every time I pitched it, uh, I mean, I knew it was never going to get made, but every time I pitched it, someone said, "Man," the person would say something along the lines of, "Man, I will never make that movie, but I have got to read it. It sounds insane." And so I got a lot of reads off it. And someone finally came back to me and said, "This should be a graphic novel." So now I'm working on something as a graphic novel, and that's a form that I'm not unfamiliar with, but that I haven't done a lot of. And it forces you to really think visually because you're describing what's happening in each panel of the page, and you need to think about your dialogue being short enough to fit into a word bubble, and you need to think about what's going to be on that last panel to make someone want to turn the page and everything. So it forces me to think about my story in a more visual way, which is
Mm.
closer to directing. But still, even when I describe what's on the panel, I think in terms of the dinosaur tears the guy's arm off, and then I want the artist. I wouldn't work with an artist who didn't have their own vision. I want them to sort of like say what that would look like,
Yeah.
and what that and so on, and like really flex your muscles, man. And so it's directing was not for me. I have tremendous amount of respect for directors
Mm.
in the same way that pole vaulting is not for me, but I have a lot of respect for pole vaulters because I can't do it. But it's I have a lot of respect for directors, but I also think I love that I love that feeling of writing something and then putting it in the hands of somebody else and it turning into something other than what I imagined.
Mm.
I mean, I have done, just to sort of get an ear for the dialogue or whatever. I have done like table reads of
Yeah.
my work. Assign a character to each person and then have them read it out loud. And you know, actors will read a line and sort of inject an emotion into it, or inflections or stresses on syllables or whatever that maybe I didn't necessarily envision in the first place. And it takes the character and it takes the story in a completely different direction. And even that, just sitting around a table with iced tea is not iced tea the actor, iced tea, like we all have something to drink, just sitting around the table very informally, um with all sitting around the table informally and just seeing like how little bits of my story can sort of come to life, like a little plant poking through the soil that I didn't know was there at all, is like, to me it's incredible. It's amazing. It is so amazing to see that happen, that maybe I kill that thrill when I sit down and try to storyboard everything and tell the actors what they need to do and whatever. I lose that aspect of it that I love so much, which is that thrill of not knowing where the end result will be of a thing that I created.
Mm.
I feel like it must be like, I mean, I don't have any kids, but it must be what it's like to have a kid. It's like you raise a child to a certain age, and then it's like, all right, go out in the world and make something of yourself, and you don't know what it is, but you've done the best that you can to this date until you finally have to shove them out of the nest. And I sort of see screenplays the same way. I think it's tremendous. But to answer your question, if anyone out there is looking for a director for their project, call somebody else. I can recommend some people, but I'm not your guy.
But I mean, like you said, producing it, because I've gone back into comics and graphic novels after, I don't know, like 10, 12 years of thinking, yeah, that's not something I'm interested in anymore. But there is so much um like creative freedom within that doesn't involve, working an 18-hour day with,
Yeah.
actors who are tired and losing it, and people worried about, well, hopefully they're not worried about money, and certain time constraints. But now that you're kind of diving into that area, do you feel like the graphic novel uh, approach to your storytelling might be another way to go? Like, do you feel better about doing that more long term, or how do you feel so far about that?
I mean, the answer is yes. I'm really loving it. I mean, it's sort of in the beauty of one of the challenges in filmmaking, of course, is budget.
Yeah.
And when it comes to drawing graphic novels, it costs just as much to draw a gigantic space battle as it does to draw two people sitting in a room. So the opportunities for the stories you want to tell kind of grow.
Mm.
And because it doesn't have to be big. I mean, Mouse won a Pulitzer Prize. That's not a big story. Um, you know, um, and it's also amazing. And Road to Perdition, another kind of smallish story, which human story, let's say. But that would be expensive on film because it's period piece with all the costumes and everything. Um, so that works. So it helps with budget where budget is concerned now, but it's not zero budget. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a enthusiastic believer that when possible, everybody should get paid. Artists, pay writers, pay actors, pay singers, voiceover artists, whatever. You'll be getting my invoice for this podcast, by the way. No, I'm just
Oh yeah, $500 in minutes.
But so I'm a firm believer in paying everybody. So like the guy who's done some of the initial artwork for my thing just was a friendly and said, I'll be happy to just do like a cover image and a page for you, something like that.
Wow.
So like, but if I were to go ahead, like I've written a couple of the issues, I think it's going to be a 9-issue one. I want to get them all done beforehand, but then it's going to be a crowdfunding scenario, and having some initial artwork is going to help on a crowdfund. So it's like an investment, and I hope to get him back. But I love writing in that form. It's too soon yet for me though to determine whether I love the form or I just kind of like the novelty of writing in a new form. It could be I get tired of that format, but I will tell you what, I recommend it to everybody just because it forced me to think about a story I'd already written in a completely different way. And I think that when you think about stories in completely different ways, you reveal or you unpack new opportunities within that story. It's like I have a character in the story. She's in the armed services, but she's physically much smaller than everybody else, right? And so I say she's very small, and then in the screenplay. But then when it comes to the graphic novel, I need to sort of say, okay, how do I represent this? So then there's a scene where everybody needs to like put their eye in like in a thing, a security thing, right? To like for a retinal scan,
Yeah.
and the two guys just lean in and put the thing in. She needs like a boost up in order to do it, right? So there's a panel where you see the guys from like the chin to the middle of their chest, and then you see the top of her head, this kind of thing. And so it's like you can get the laughs and you can get the impression across with one panel. Um, Whereas in a film, it would be like I'd mention it in passing, but then it's like, who do we cast? We can't cast this person because this person playing this other character is not tall enough to make that difference, and so on. And now people just are represented by how I say it, just because I say it, which is cool. And and you find opportunities for little side jokes and what specific things look like. In the screenplay, it just said interior, the Oval Office, but then in the graphic novel, it says interior of the Oval Office, and then I have a little description. This president's Oval Office is more built around the sidebar so that he can get to his whiskey as fast as he wants than anything else, right? So it's like, so that the artist knows what to draw.
Hmm.
I need to think about what's going on there, but not just what does it look like, but how can the things reveal something about the character? How can things reveal something about the story? Um, and I find that to be an awful lot of fun, which maybe is too much of a degree of detail to put into a screenplay. That would be something like when you're in production, then you go to the set deck and say, okay, here's how I want it to look. Go ahead and find all these different pieces of stuff and so on. And the director would make that decision. But
Yeah.
now I can say, here's what I want it to look like on the page, so that anyone who's paying close attention to the art will learn something about the characters or the story or the themes or whatever. And I really, really, really kind of enjoy giving that level of instruction, but still leaving enough flexibility for the person to be creative within that. And so maybe to that degree, I'm comfortable being a director, but only into a comic book and not into an actual production.
Yeah, it seems like you have found that sort of Tarantino level of like detail and comfort in your story within the graphic novel space.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. On Pretend World's Real People, Bob Schultz equals Quentin Tarantino.
It's been inked. That is what is happening right now. I love asking this question, and I am very excited to hear your answer. But if you have a like a party story you could share with our listeners, so something that doesn't take place at a party unless it does for the context of this show, but something that happened in your life or something you experienced that was so impactful you could easily recount the details of that interaction or experience at a party with your friends, or you feel inclined to share that story. Do you have something
Mm,
like that in your repertoire that you could share with our listeners?
yeah, that's a challenging one.
Yeah. It could be,
Yeah,
anything from writing back when you were in Ithaca, working, late at night and then finishing a script. It could be directing Breakdown Lane. It could be anything. But
yeah,
something that kind of stands out to you.
um, yeah. I there's several stories that I tend to go back to. Here's one. Here. This is one of those classic stories where I'm not 100% sure that it actually happened, or if I've sort of extrapolated it in my brain. Um, but uh, we were at uh, Toronto Film Festival, and we were trying to, talking about distribution on one of the films, or whatever, and seeing some movies and so on. And at that time, China was just like opening up to, having film shot there and so on. And so Keanu Reeves did shot a film there called Man of Tai Chi, which I think he also directed.
Yeah.
And so he and his distributor and I think one of his producing partners or somebody were on a little panel about shooting in China, right? And there was and so it was an interesting panel. There's interesting information to be had, and then at the end, everything wrapped up, and people, everyone in the audience got up and sort of moved forward to sort of chat with the panelists. And of course, the entire world was crowded around Keanu. Now, I wanted to chat with the distributor guy because I wanted to learn about distribution in China. So I'm standing over here, and chit chatting, and and sort of waiting my turn. There was just a couple people ahead of me, but I'm looking over here at the conversation, at people crowded around Keanu, right? And somebody's like, Keanu, and this kid took his shot. It was like, Keanu, man, I love you. I have so much respect for you. I really just want to break into this industry. I would do anything. I'll fetch coffee for you, do anything. Can you please just give me an opportunity? Can I please let me break in? And Keanu Reeves said, I respect what you're doing. I'm not going to hire you, but here's some advice. Stay true to yourself. Be kind always, and good things will come to you. And just be nice, be kind always. And I thought, man, that, first of all, that's the best way to burst somebody's dream bubble, is to like be encouraging and nice and sweet about it. And be kind always is something I took to my heart, which, let's be fair, I let myself down on that sometimes, but I try. But I because I'm somewhat tall and Keanu Reeves is tall, and everyone else was like beneath us, I made eye contact with Keanu Reeves, and I said, did you just tell them to be excellent to each other? and he went, and he turned into Bill S. Preston Esquire immediately. Was like, I did, and it's like, I'm actually wearing a shirt that says "Be excellent to each other" on it, and sorry everyone, and I knocked my microphone down, and it's like, I did, and I was like, that's amazing, like, because you sort of, the lessons I learned from that, not only from what Keanu said specifically about being kind always and everything, but also like, it also reminded me and gave me this lesson that, yes, I was there as a producer, and yes, I see myself as a writer and a producer and a filmmaker, but it is critical, it is so important never to lose sight of the fact that you're also a fan. Everybody in the industry, whether they're actors, carpenters, writers, agents, lawyers, anybody who got into this industry got into it because they love movies or TV. And somewhere along the way, they learned that they don't have what it takes to maybe be a director, but they can build a set amazingly. So this is their part of bringing the thing forward. And all the recognition they get is to be the teeniest, tiniest little font on the credits as it goes by, while you're waiting for the post-credit sequence in your Marvel movie. And so those people get forgotten, but they are also sort of in a space. They're also doing they got into this thing that we all love, also because they loved it at some point in time. And it's always important to remember that you can still be a fan. So that's why I stop being apologetic for the things that I like. I mean, I did say earlier that I consider Is It Cake to be sort of a guilty pleasure, but generally speaking, I have a philosophy as nothing's a guilty pleasure. A pleasure is a pleasure. I have great appreciation for The Godfather, and I have great appreciation for Citizen Kane, and I thought Everything Everywhere All at Once was the best film of 2022 so far. So these films that people consider of artistic merit or whatever are of course great. But who is the first person to buy a ticket every time a Fast and the Furious movie comes out? This guy.
So, those of you who are listening, he has an excellent Fast and Furious. It's like a chrome plastic cup he's drinking out of.
Yeah, it's like, I went and saw Fast. I want to say the Fast 8, I think, or Fast 9, one of them.
It looks like it, yeah.
And it was like, you go there and you get the Fast and Furious meal. So I got the Fast and Furious popcorn bucket, and I got the Fast and Furious cup, and I drink from it every day. But it's like, I mean, I don't care if they're silly. I don't care if they're, I mean, I think that they're better than anyone ever lets on, but it's okay just to like something just because you like it. Yeah. And it's excellent to like something that maybe is not that great, but that came into your life at a time when you needed it most of all. I happen to think the movie Joe versus the Volcano, which is universally sort of looked side-eyed at, like, it's not a top level Tom Hanks movie or whatever. I love that movie, and I will argue, not only do I think is it a great movie, I think it is certainly the best Tom Hanks Meg Ryan movie.
Mhm.
But I love that movie on its own merits. But I came to love that movie because I was in a period when I first saw it. I was in a period of my life where I felt like I was just dragging my feet to my day job every day and not doing anything inspirational. My life was sort of gray and dreary. And it's a story about a guy whose life is gray and dreary, and he gets a chance to go have a grand adventure, and he goes and does it. And his life becomes more colorful and vibrant and exciting and amazing. And I needed that message in my life at that time, and so that movie meant something more to me. And I think that movies and TV and books and comic books and all these different music, all these different forms of art are great for somebody at some point in their life because they needed whatever it was that it brings into the world. And when you find the thing that you need at the same time that you need it, it's a little piece of magic. And I don't think it's fair to then call something like that a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
For somebody, it is a very important thing. And it's not always something like, I saw this movie and it helped me not commit suicide. I mean, it could just be something as I had a bad day at school, and then I came home and saw somebody had this movie called Airplane, and it gave me a laugh, and all of a sudden I knew that things weren't as bad. Or we've all had these situations, especially in the last couple of years, which have been so challenging, where it's like the last, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. The the fridge dies, you can't get you can't unscrew the top off the mayonnaise jar or something, and then you're like, that is it. You shake your fist at the sky and say, I am done, this is the worst, this is the end. And then you go and you sit down and you turn on the TV, and it's like there's an episode of Cheers on, or on Netflix or something, and it's like, man, to this day, I mean, I'm sorry I keep on rambling. I hope you can edit your podcast, but like there's a in the pilot episode of Cheers, there's a background story where, like, the main story is going on where Diane's fiance is like leaving her at the bar and going off and talking to his ex, and it's more and more clear that he's going to just go back with the ex. And the background story, all the guys in Cheers are having this like silly conversation. What is the sweatiest movie of all time? Right. And so they're talking like, well, what do you think the sweatiest movie of all time is? I don't know. I think what could it be? A Rocky 2. Yeah, that's pretty good one. That's pretty sweaty. And then in comes this guy from the A story, the Diane's fiance, and she's like this, like, oh, hand on her forehead, being like, I can't deal with this anymore. And she goes, will you believe that these Neanderthals are talking about the sweatiest movie of all time? And he turns around and goes, Cool Hand Luke. And they're like, oh yeah, good one, right? And it's like such a brilliant moments where it's like, and I mean, this was, I first saw it back before, I mean, I was in my teens, so I didn't know about story structure and A story, B story, and character arcs and all this other stuff. But now I can sort of identify why the joke works, and why it's so brilliant. But it doesn't matter why. The fact is, it is brilliant, and it just is like this moments, this capturing of lightning in the bottle. Which, if back in the day before streaming, if you just happen to be like answering the phone or in the kitchen or answering a question for your kid or something, you would have missed that joke because it was broadcast and then it was gone. And but when you're a writer or a filmmaker or an artist of any kind, you have a moment like that, and your first thought is, that's brilliant, and your second thought is, I will never be that brilliant, I hate them, and the third thought is, how did they do that? And it becomes like, how did they do that? I want to be able to do something as magical as that joke. I mean, that is one of the most perfect jokes ever written, and it is just so fleeting. I mean, the most perfect joke ever written is, of course, surely you can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. But it's such a magical thing to be part. I don't even remember what the question is that got us going here, but it's that capturing of voice and truth and humor and wonder that makes me, a character who's set up to be the bad guy throughout, makes me love the guy because he got Cool Hand Luke, and it's one of those things that that even on the page, I'm sure would have made you burst out laughing. And it's the magic is being able to like stimulate something in someone's imagination to so that they know what this joke is. To make someone laugh just from words on a page to me is the truest thing of magic. You're not seeing someone step on a banana peel and fall down. You're describing something in such a way that gives it voice. And the thing that made me want to be a writer, I was reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams is great book. And there's a line in it that goes something like this: the spaceship hung in the air in exactly the same way that bricks don't. Right? And I'm like, I'm reading this as a 12-year-old. I'm like, exactly the same way that bricks don't. Like, what? And it's like, again, it's just like a little throwaway joke, and it has stuck with me for the last 40 years as this like quintessential moment when I was sitting there in, I want to say it was shop class or something in middle school, like with the book under the desk, like reading because I wasn't paying attention to school, and there it was, and I like pointed it out to my buddy who also was reading. It's like, and I was like, "That's hilarious! Right? That is hilarious!" And it was like a unifying kind of thing that my friend and I could bond over, and then as later on in life, as I met other fans of it, could also bond over it. Um, and it all happened just because someone decided to say, instead of just writing "it hung in the sky," saying "it hung in the air" in the same way that bricks don't. I'm like, that is a choice that was made, and it cost 3 extra words and utterly changed my life. How can you turn away
Yeah.
from that kind of like power and influence and
Yeah.
immortality that that brings?
That's the absolute beauty of writing, of being part of a writing circle, of just sharing stories, is the idea that anybody at any point can come up with something that will completely change your life. The Place Beyond the Pines is a film that a lot of people have not really seen. That
Mhm.
changed my life at 21. I was bawling like a baby after that. I have
Yeah,
watched it 3 times since. I own it, but it is one of those movies that, it just there's certain lines that just that hit you. And I love that you bring all this gravitas and this passion for filmmaking and writing to your lectures and your seminars, and having like going back to the Toronto, I think it was the Toronto International Film Festival, where Keanu Reeves was giving his advice to this person who's trying to break it in. That is another big thing we do here, is trying to see if our guests have any advice or like a piece of wisdom they can impart, upon our listeners, whether it's somebody who's starting right now or has been in it for, you know, 10, 15 years, and they're still trying to go in, they're still trying to break through. Do you have anything that maybe you've held on to that you can, bestow upon our listeners as well?
yeah. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but I think that it's that the more that you can sort of not be a mercenary about your art, not be a not trying to write something that will sell,
Mm,
right? Don't think in those terms. Write for the person you were when you first fell in love with writing or movies. That is your audience. That is your person. That who's you. That is it will be the most satisfying to impress, right? So don't worry about it getting made. Look, if this were the 1950s and the only way to get a movie made was to go to a studio because all the cameras were so heavy and film was expensive and whatever, I'd have different advice. We live in an age now where we all carry around in our pocket something that can make a movie,
yeah,
you know? So write something that you are passionate about. I promise, I assure you, the more you write what you're passionate about, the more that passion will reveal itself on the page.
mm,
Y- I
yeah,
mean, from a practical, so and nobody develops a film, no one buys anything, no one makes movie or whatever based on analytics. Look, I can give you, if you want, 50 hours on structure and character arc and so on. But structure and character arc and beats and acts and all this stuff are important, but only as a mechanism to develop emotion, to excuse me, to deliver emotion,
mm,
right? Using these the emotion, the passion, the thing that makes you cry at The Place Beyond the Pines, and it makes me laugh at at Joe versus the Volcano, or tear up at it or whatever. The thing that makes us all stand up and cheer when Rocky wins the fight, or 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 whatever it is what makes it happen. That stuff is the soup, right? The
Yeah.
emotions are the soup. Structure and so on are the bowl, and you can't eat soup without a bowl. It goes everywhere. So soup is most effectively delivered in a bowl. So you can take all the courses. Please take my courses. You can take all the courses you want in structure and so on, and they're important. But focus on your emotion. Focus on your passion. It's not going to happen with your first script. You have to sort of learn to get past having to think about what you're doing and stop thinking about it and just writing in a natural kind of way where it's as natural as breathing. And next thing you know, you're writing things that you want to write because you're not sort of hung up by these other sort of hurdles that you need to get over. Um, the way that I envision it is like this. Look, I don't get to do it over here in England that much, but I love to drive. Okay, when I'm stressed out, I go for a drive and listen to music. I've driven back and forth across America 8 or 10 times. I When I'm stressed, I just go for a drive. When I'm happy, I go for a drive. I like throwing the dog in the back seat and just saying I'm going northwest, and when I'm tired, I'm going to get a hotel. Just get itchy feet. I love it. I love the experience of driving, the feeling of hitting the accelerator and the car takes off, or a tight steering, mechanism, or and all this stuff. The whole experience of driving, I love. But I don't know how to build a car. There are engineers and and line workers and and all these people who design and build and execute the pieces necessary to give me that experience that I love. And I don't know how they do it. All I know is that this is the experience that I love. That's our job as writers too. We need to recognize what the experience is of the reader and deliver that more so than and learn how to build the car that delivers that experience, which is the screenplay. So so I try to teach everybody, the more you want to learn to write, the more you want to be aware that being a good writer is not about writing well.
Mm.
Being a good writer is about giving the reader an experience. Good writing is about reading. Good lecturing is about listening. Good acting is about watching. It's if you could give a performance as an actor that you are very happy with, but if the audience isn't responding to it, then there's some disconnect going on there, and their experience isn't going to be as good.
Yeah.
So it becomes critical to like not get so bogged down in what those words say on the page and think, when someone reads this, what are they going to feel? And it's hard to identify that, especially in screenwriting, because I think a lot of people early in their writing journeys see the screenplay as a series of instructions for the cast and crew. Zoom in on X. Joe enters. Joe says this. Sally eats eggs. And I'm like, but there's nothing in there to sort of indicate to me what emotion I'm supposed to feel from that part of the story. Joe enters, tells me nothing, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
you want, all it tells me is you want Joe in the scene and he's not there, so he's got to come in. And so I think that the more that you sort of tell a story, weave a tale, regale me with your ideas and regale me with your story, is going to make me have it's going to have so much fun. Just go ahead and read read your screenplay. I advise to the listeners, read your screenplay, then go find it's out there on the internet, Shane Black's Lethal Weapon screenplay, where it's talking about, this is the kind of house that I'm going to buy when you pay $1 million for my screen. This is a great place to this. You can be certain there's cocaine in every drawer in this house. That kind of thing. It doesn't say the square footage of the house or what the colors are. It gives you like an emotional impression,
Yeah.
and I think that's the beauty of it, is that we can sort of get into people's imaginations and make them regret the fact that the movie doesn't exist yet, to the point that they just have to make it. And that's
Yeah.
sort of our job.
Oh, I love that. And I love that Lethal Weapon script. I think it was the first thing I read in college, and I will
Yeah,
read it at least once a year just to refamiliarize myself with, oh yeah, this is about having fun. Like at the end
yeah.
of the
The
day.
beauty of it is, the beauty of it is that I teach screenwriting, and I teach a course on voice. And Lethal Weapon is far enough in the past now that a lot of people haven't seen it. A lot of people in their 20s and 30s haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So I show them a scene and I say, okay, write that scene. And they all, and then I'm like, okay, here's how Shane Black wrote it. And it's like, do you see how you can sort of, like, if, I say, okay, Sally, write that scene. And she writes the scene and it's accurate, but it's like, there's not enough Sally in it.
Yeah.
I need to make sure there's a lot of Bob in everything that I write, so that when people read it, they're like, yeah, that's a Bob Schultz script. Even if they don't like my style, at least it's not boring. You know what I mean? I mean, anybody who's reading scripts with an eye toward producing them has a reading list from floor to the ceiling that they have to get through. How do you stand apart? And the only way you stand apart, the only thing that you have that nobody else has is yourself.
Yeah.
So just fill it with everything that you are, your passions, your hates, your fears, your insecurities, whatever it is that serves it, and write things in a way that nobody else can. It's when I'm lecturing, I very often, I get introduced and I come out to my walk-on song, which is, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results. I mean, it's a great old song and everything, but it's also the philosophy that makes screenplays succeed.
Yeah.
Anybody can tell a story. If I take a group of 100 writers and say, here's your prompt, they'll all write it and I'll get 100 different stories. But the only way that the thing that sets you apart is not your ideas. It is your specific human expression of that idea and making people love you. You think when I read The Way That Bricks Don't didn't mean that I was going to go pick up every book Douglas Adams wrote for the rest of his life? Of course I did, because you start to love the writer and the way that the writing is done, regardless of how you relate to the story. That is true of screenplays as well. You can tell a Tarantino story from a David Mamet story, from a Phoebe Waller-Bridge story, and you can do it not just because of what they choose to write about, but how they write it. Even Jackie Brown, which was based on an Elmore Leonard book, sounds like Quentin Tarantino because Tarantino wrote it, right? It's like Tarantino cannot write something that doesn't sound like himself. And we all need to get to that point, discovering what that voice is, that unique expression is, and then being confident enough in it not to steer away from it, but dive right in head first with it.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. I 100% agree with everything you just said. And I think that is, finding your tone is probably the hardest thing to do. But yeah, once you find it, like you said, like that's a Bob Schultz script, like you could tell by the first half of the page. And I'm not sure if there's anything that would correlate with this, but as far as, you being on the lecture circuit and also you working on your scripts, do you have anything that you can give a shout out to or you want to promote with this episode that I can put into the show notes here, whether it's maybe something that you're really passionate about organization wise outside of your work or your work itself? Like, is there anything that I can promote for you?
Yeah. Why don't you, thank you. I still do some courses online as well as in person through the London Screenwriters Festival. So I'll send you a link that you can put in the notes.
Sweet. Awesome.
And also, look, this is something that that I'm just a fan of, that I am not involved in. I'm just a supporter of. But there's a movie that's having its world premiere at the end of August over here in London at Fright Fest. It's called Power Tool Cheerleaders versus the boy band of the Screeching Dead. There's a chainsaw in it named Bob, and that's named after me. So my latest credit on IMDb is Bob the Chainsaw. So,
oh my God.
So if you have a chance to support that one, or in any way that you can support. Look, man, I mentioned I love Fast and Furious. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love all these big things. But any chance any one of your listeners get, support independent films, support smaller things that aren't just advertised to you incessantly. So things that you need to seek out. Good films are worth being sought out. Every now and then, one of them will peek above the horizon, like Everything Everywhere All at Once and whatever. But find small films, go to film festivals that feature films that maybe won't get a wide release, and see them and shake hands with the filmmakers and congratulate them on getting it done. and that has the added benefit that you will start to build a base of contacts of people who can help you when your thing is done.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you know what? We haven't had a whole lot of, like, independent film here in Denver as far as, like, projects that are now coming out. So, I you had me at Power Tool Cheerleaders. Like,
Yeah.
I love those types of films, so I can't wait to check it out. Yeah, supporting independent film is absolutely huge, and, I can't wait to promote it. I can't wait to promote this episode. We have one more thing, obviously, we have to do before
Yeah.
I let you go, but I just wanna say, like, first and foremost, it was amazing meeting you. I'm glad we were able to finally do this, and, I'm sure I'm gonna have you back at some point, right? Because we can't leave this at just what, an hour and 20 minutes. I feel like this
It,
this,
it would
this
it
has
would be an honor.
longevity.
It's been a real pleasure, and I mean, look, I I love Denver, and I hope that everyone's healthy and safe over there. Here's a little tip, by the way. I meant to
Yeah.
mention. Um, just the more you travel, the more adventures you have and whatever in your life, the more that you will become comfortable with interacting with people and meeting people and so on. So I recommend everyone get out there. I traveled around America so much, and I always one thing I always try to do is read like sports journalism. I think that it's a good sort of what sports journalists do is particularly like with coverage of a game is they take a 3 hour long game and they turn it into a narrative, right? This pitcher came in and he was already injured and he worked through the injury through this, and so that's something that screenwriters tend to do a lot. You take a big story and try to form it into a narrative. So it's good to sort of read that. As a result of that, though, as a side effect, I have a pretty decent knowledge of sports teams all around America, right? And so, I mean, I'm not an expert or anything. It's just you read and you absorb stuff. So you meet somebody new. Look, if you're in LA, nobody's from LA, right? And so I say, I meet you there, and I shake hands, and say, "Oh, you're from?" You're like Denver. And I'm like, "Oh, go Broncos" or something. And they're like, and all of a sudden, so they're like, "Oh my God, somebody said something like from home." It makes you feel familiar. So like read things other than screenplays and so on, so that you can sort of be a person of the world. It's hey, go Rockies. Hey, go. I don't know, Bulldogs? Is there like the Colorado? Is that like a University of Colorado or something? I don't even know.
Uh,
Um,
Buffalo.
Go Buffaloes. Um, so like just sort of the more that you sort of think of the other people that you're interacting with, not as members of the industry or people that can help you or bricks in a wall without any doors that are keeping you from the industry. Just remember that everyone you're talking to are just people. People are folks, and they like talking to you and they like hearing your story. And if you can't work on something together, that's fine. The worst case scenario is you have a little conversation with someone with no pressure. So just get out there and meet people. I'm sorry. I just can't stop talking about this. I love screenwriting so much.
No, when you brought up like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm rambling so much." No, that's this show is all about like just letting that passion out, and I think that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
listeners really appreciate it. But yeah,
Cool.
I'm not cutting any of this out. This is
Oh no.
perfect, man. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else I can add to it because it's been such like a clean wrap up. But I think we should just dive in
Mm,
into our awkward goodbye, which I think you may have listened to once or twice on the show. But I assume you've seen Wayne's World.
yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm gonna give you a silent 3, 2, 1 countdown, and when I point to you, just give me your best verbal or nonverbal. Some people like to do that too. Awkward goodbye, and then I will sign off from there.
Okay.
You ready?
Ready. Let's go.
All right, buddy. In.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. I love you, but not in that really weird way when some stranger tells you they love you, and not in kind of any kind of uncomfortable kind of way, just in that way that all humans should kind of love each other. Or as Kiana would put it, be kind always and look out for other people.